Hi, PerspectaWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday, August 8th. A lot of heavy rain last night, late yesterday in the Mid-Atlantic region. A cold frontal system worked its way through from the northwest to the southeast across the I-95 corridor. That front is stalling out right now, kind of dissipating in the southern part of the Mid-Atlantic. A secondary cold front, an all-important secondary cold front, will arrive early Friday along the eastern seaboard and then pass off the eastern coastline, and that will usher in a very comfortable air mass for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It looks like a great weekend indeed, with plenty of sunshine both weekend days in places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. Low humidity and comfortably warm temperatures, not only in the Mid-Atlantic region, but the Midwest. The Northeast should have spectacular weather for this time of the year. Really starting on Friday, there'll be a noticeable drop in humidity levels tomorrow behind that secondary cold front, and it's paving the way for very nice weather for Saturday and Sunday. Thought we'd take this kind of a quieter pattern that's developing here over the next few days in the Mid-Atlantic region to take a look ahead at the remaining weeks in the month of August and look at some sea surface temperature anomalies around the world that could very well play a role in the second half of the tropical season and ultimately the winter season that is rapidly approaching us. And there's several areas of interest here. First thing that jumps out at you is this warm blob of water. This red area here represents above normal sea surface temperature anomalies. Way above normal, tucked in south of Alaska off the northwest coastline of the U.S. and Canada here, and that could play a very crucial role in the upcoming winter. One thing that tends to happen if you have a very large, anomalously warm area of water in this part of the world, it pumps up an upper level ridge right in this part of North America. And an upper level ridge with a flow pattern like this could very well result in lots of cold air outbreaks that make it into the central and eastern U.S. from northern Canada. The wind flow around an upper level ridge would be something like this, bringing cold air from central Canada all the way into the central part of the U.S., and that'll spread out to the eastern seaboard. We typically had this pattern during the middle part of the decade. The winters of 2013-14 and 14-15 often experienced this kind of a pattern in the northern Pacific, and an upper level pattern like that allowed for cold air outbreaks into the central and eastern U.S. That, of course, is not the only factor to monitor for the next over the next several months. We have a weak El Nino right now in the central part of the Pacific Ocean, an area here of above normal temperatures. Computer forecast models in general maintain it as a weak El Nino going into the fall and then even into the winter season. Not necessarily a neutral signal coming out of the central Pacific for the upcoming winter. We'll show in a moment here a compilation of computer forecast models that tend to maintain its weak El Nino status through the fall and into the winter. Notice some cooler than normal conditions off the west coast of South America right now. But out in the central Pacific, this is the tropical part of the Pacific Ocean. The equator runs right in this region right here. We still have a weak El Nino, and very well could remain weak El Nino going into the upcoming winter season. Meanwhile, let's clear the deck right here and look at the tropical Atlantic. Notice this zone right in this region right here, basically from the west coast of Africa to the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico. Fair amount of colder than normal conditions right here off the west coast of Africa, represented by the blues. Relatively normal across the southeast U.S., Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean, maybe a little bit of above normal here. Basically, this has been somewhat of an inhibiting factor to those African wave-type tropical systems that move from the east to the west with the trade winds in the equatorial part of the Atlantic Ocean here, the tropical Atlantic. And it looks like it'll remain relatively quiet over the next week or so in the Atlantic Basin. However, there are signs now that the activity will really start to ramp up during the second half of the month of August, going into September. Climatologically speaking, we usually ramp up in activity in the Atlantic Basin, steadily ramp up through the month of August, and usually reaching a peak around the middle part of September. But this is an important area here in terms of tropical activity, and we still have a lot of the season left to go. The second half of August, again, looks like we may get more and more active, and it may become more and more active as we head into the month of September. Well, we mentioned up front about some computer forecast models that tend to maintain a weak El Nino in the central part of the Pacific Ocean. This is a compilation of what we call dynamical models that use actual current observations as part of the model predictions, and statistical models that tend to just rely on statistics. And really, the combination of the two generally predicts weak El Nino conditions to continue through the fall and into the winter season. Here we are right now in this area right here with weak El Nino. This is the neutral line right here. Anything above this line in this area right here represents El Nino. Anything below it represents La Nina conditions right here. And for the most part, the computer forecast models going forward maintain a weak El Nino. These are rolling 3-month averages. For example, this is July, August, and September right here. Looking ahead to the winter season, December, January, and February, right in this region right here, tend to have weak El Nino. The red line right cutting across like that represents the average of the dynamical models, and the green line right here represents the average of the statistical models, generally in agreement here for weak El Nino conditions in the Pacific Ocean. Now, it's not only the magnitude that is important in terms of potential on winter weather, for example, in the central and eastern U.S., it's the exact location. And a weak El Nino in the central part of the Pacific Ocean combined with warm blob of water in the northern Pacific could very well lead to numerous cold air outbreaks into the central and eastern U.S. during the upcoming winter season. Air masses that travel from northern Canada into the central U.S. and then spread into the eastern part of the nation. So those are areas of interest that we will closely monitor over the next couple of months. Could very well have an impact on the winter, and certainly an impact on the second half of the tropical season. Well, let's take a quick look at what we may expect for the remaining few weeks in the month of August. Definitely some cooler air masses compared to normal headed from south central Canada into the Midwest and ultimately into the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. And not only this upcoming weekend, but there are signs for multiple air masses like that over the next few weeks. This is the 500 millibar height anomaly pattern averaged out over the current 5-day period from last night's 6C ensemble run of the GFS. And whenever you have a low pressure here in the upper part of the atmosphere this time of the year, you can expect relatively nice conditions at the surface. And again, we'll have low humidity and generally slightly cooler than normal temperatures for the Friday, Saturday, Sunday period in the Mid-Atlantic region, the Northeast U.S., and across the Great Lakes. And the heat will be confined to the south central U.S. Places like Texas will finally get very hot. They've actually had a relatively cool summer, but they have some days near 100 degrees coming up in the state of Texas, but quite a cool period for California. Let's now jump ahead to days 6 to 10. And here we go. This is basically next week, running from about the 13th of August to the 18th of August. 500 millibar height anomaly pattern in days 6 to 10. Still some signs of that upper level low over the northeastern U.S. with upper level region really confined down to the deep south. And you have a nice flow of air here cutting across from basically the northwestern U.S. into the northeastern U.S. Not exactly zonal, but fairly close to being zonal. By zonal, I mean west to east here. But with this kind of a flow, It's not going to get excessively hot for any kind of extended period in the Midwest, in the Great Lakes region, or the Northeast U.S. And indeed, it looks like a relatively decent pattern temperature-wise over the next few weeks in those parts of the country. But down in the deep south, from Texas down into the southeast U.S., very well looks like a hot period coming up, not only this 5-day period, but the next one as well. Now let's go even deeper into the month of August. This is days 11 to 15 in terms of the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast, running from the 18th of August to the 23rd of August. By the way, these maps from tropicaltidbits.com. Notice again, continuation of a flow of air off the Pacific across the northern U.S., and that will continue to prevent extended heat waves in the northern U.S., in the northern plains, the Great Lakes, the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast U.S. So again, all signs here point to hot, real hot weather, persistent hot weather confined to the southern U.S., let's say Texas, maybe the southwest U.S., all the way to the southeast U.S. over the next couple of weeks. Well, one final set of maps I'd like to show here are the 850 millibar temperature anomalies. This is from the last night's 6Z run of the GFS. Again, we'll just kind of walk quickly through this, looking at the next couple of weeks in the month of August. We are relatively normal in the interior part of the Mid-Atlantic region, a little bit below normal, represented by the blues, a little bit above normal along the I-95 corridor region. But this blob of cooler than normal conditions extending from southern Canada into the northern plains just drops southeast, and this is the air mass that we will begin to experience on Friday here in the I-95 corridor region, with noticeably lowering humidity levels, and it sticks around all weekend long. Here we are Saturday morning and into the day on Sunday right here. Still cooler than normal conditions in the mid-Atlantic region, the northeast U.S., and notice upstream yet another nice air mass for this time of the year. South central Canada, northern plains. Let's just keep moving forward here. That kind of sneaks in through the back door here into New England, up across southeastern Canada into New England. We do get warmer than normal for a brief period of time, but again, with that flow in the upper part of the atmosphere from the northwest U.S. into the northeast U.S. will prevent any kind of extended hot weather. And here we go during the middle and latter part of next week, yet another chilly air mass for this time of the year, for the middle part of August, moving into the Great Lakes and the northeast U.S. and the Mid-Atlantic region. Let's just keep moving forward here, and here we go. This is all the way out to now the second half of the month of August, all the way to Monday, August 19th, yet another cool weekend relative to normal coming up, not only this weekend, but the following weekend as well. And we move forward here, and yet another cooler than normal outbreak reaches the northern plains. Here we are in the third week of August now, and that too drops south and east across the Great Lakes and right towards the Mid-Atlantic region. So again, it looks like August will turn out fairly comfortable in places like the Midwest, the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast U.S., with an occasional cooler than normal air mass moving in. No extended heat wave expected with this kind of a pattern. The real heat looks like it'll be confined to the southern U.S., especially Texas, all the way into the deep south. And as far as the tropics, quiet for the next few days, maybe the next week or so, but probably ramping up in activity during the second half of the month of August. So that's it for now. For PerspectaWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.